Obviously, we just had the big Lakers-Mavs trade, and I'm sorry for you, Nikki, as the Mavs fan of us.
Why are you bringing it up in a
Because-
motorsport podcast?
Because I'm asking, what do you think the motorsports or F1 equivalent
Oh.
of trading Luka Doncic for AD? What would the F1 equivalent of that be?
Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari.
Yes, and I would say yes. In exchange, though, if Leclerc went to Mercedes, that is where I would be going.
You're right.
Right?
That would be insane.
Right?
I don't watch baseball, so we're just gonna.
This is basketball.
Today's episode topic, which is Formula Feeder Series. Welcome to the Outlap podcast. This is your host Joey Chong, Jackson Lembros, and Nikki
Wong.
Hi.
Oh God, I
Almost lost it there. We got it.
All right.
It feels weird not being in the driver's seat for this. I'm proud of you though, Joe.
We're
I'm
going right.
all
into
right.
it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we're gonna stall it in first. We're gonna start off with a quick little tidbit.
Okay.
Gabriel Bortoleto was last year's Formula 2 champion. Next year he will drive for Sauber alongside Nico Hülkenberg in Formula 1. Bortoleto began his racing career after karting an Italian F4. And Nikki, what can you tell me about Italian F4?
Italian F4? Not much, Joey.
Okay,
I'm
but
sorry.
Come on, just based off. What do you think it's about? What do you think it is?
What do I think Italian F4? I'm just picturing many young people racing cars that are like Formula 1 cars, but like lower than Formula 1 cars.
That's pretty much
In
exactly.
Italy.
Yes, that is pretty much exactly.
I could also throw something in here. In my brain,
Please.
it just seems like Kimi Antonelli's graveyard. Like the amount of kids that absolutely got dunked on by Kimi Antonelli in that series, I would imagine would be like surreal.
Yeah, we're gonna talk
Wait.
we're gonna talk a little bit about Kimi Antonelli. Later.
There you go.
Wait, is F4 the thing that Leclerc's brother is on?
No, so look, Arthur Leclerc was in Formula 2
Okay.
up until very recently, where he's now moved to a lesser series called Sports Cars.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
I don't know what he did before Formula 2. I'm assuming he went through Formula 4 and Formula 3 as well. But we're going to get into what all of that is. You start off at the bottom after graduating karting or running around in if you're a gentleman driver, if you're a paid driver, then maybe you'll have done Formula like Mazda or Formula 4.
Mm-hmm.
And these are like even lower categories of like Formula racing.
And I think we should mention really quick for the guys at home, yes, we're talking about feeder series, and we're going to mention a lot here, but I know people are going to go in the comments and be like, oh, what about NASCAR? What about, Xfinity, ARCA? What about Indy Lights, Formula Atlantics? Yeah, that. When we get to those series, we're going to cover those. I think there's so many smaller sports car series that we're going to cover that on its own at some point as well. But right now, it's all about kind of the act of getting to Formula 1, Joey. And as you mentioned, that really starts out, not even with F4, it can kind of start out in those like Formula Vs, Formula 1600s, the wingless sort of open wheelers.
Yeah, and I actually want to show you real quick what a Formula V car looks like.
These things are so sick.
They're kind of hilarious. I mean, they're open wheeler cars in the purest sense. As
Yeah.
in they are open and they have four wheels.
It's like a soapbox derby car if it
Yeah.
got tripled in size.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
kind of trend kind of continues on. As you go up the formula ranks, you kind of get more sophisticated aero packages. You get more sophisticated engines. You get more powerful engines. But back to where we were. After you graduate from karts or from other series, you go to F4, Formula 4. And what these are like regional race championships. So, like I said earlier, you have Italian F4, you have British F4. And you mentioned this off podcast recording. You mentioned Chinese F4, which is has been popularized by Sergio Perez is going to Chinese F4 because he's doing so badly. That would never happen realistically, but it is something funny to think about. I think the number one thing I want to emphasize for this episode is that it is just how incredibly difficult it is actually to get from Formula 4 to Formula 3, then to 2, then to 1, and it's kind of like an exponential curve.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have any questions for me before we?
Well, right now I'm just thinking about the monetary aspect of all of these.
Okay, yes, we can get into that. The finances of junior category racing. First of all, it's extremely expensive. If you're old enough to be watching this video, then you're not. I'm sorry, it's over. there's no such thing
Yeah.
as Formula 1.
unless you're like 5 or 6.
Yeah, and at which point you won't be understanding half the words I'm using in this sentence. So, yeah, money is a huge thing. You will be losing like at least several $100,000 a year trying to race. If you're in Formula 4 and you're trying to find a seat, you need to be able to pay for that seat, or someone backing you needs to be able to pay for that seat. Do you know the name Paul Aaron?
Mm-mm.
So he was the vice champion this year in Formula 2. And he almost didn't get a seat in Formula 2 despite being, like, he was super dominant in Formula 3. Well, not super dominant. He was very, very good. You know, great career, great wins, great pace. But he just barely got into F2 because he couldn't find the funding. He had to, I don't know how eventually he got that seat, but it was very lucky for him.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the weird things about Formula racing is that money is such a big part of like getting into the next step that sometimes I feel like, and honestly not even sometimes, I just think that money matters more than your skill. And there's a few other factors that go into this, but we'll talk about that.
Really quick, Kyle Lowe, who is a friend of the show and friend of the podcast, I really hope we get him on at some point because his story is incredible and I'd love for you guys to hear it. But he's mentioned before how much, because he started in USF4, tried USF3, then made that move over to sports cars, and instantly talked about how much easier it is financially. One, because you're usually sharing a car with 1 or 2 other guys, but the amount of seats that are available to you is so much broader across numerous series. Single seaters, it's 1 seat, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a lot more open, and I know everyone wants to kind of see how far you can go in the single seaters, but it is very, very cutthroat. I don't want to derail you too much, but I think another important thing, because you mentioned the Chinese F4 as a joke, but I think the level of competition in certain regional series is very, very important, which is why, maybe for like British F4, you don't just see an all British cast, or maybe for Italian F4, you don't see an all Italian cast. You see guys kind of coming from all over the world to test that because you're getting a very high standard of competition, shall we say.
Exactly. Because in places like Britain and in Italy, you have a lot of motorsport tradition there. You have a lot of people, families, you have land, you have companies that are willing to invest in motorsport and have invested in motorsport for the past, 60 years, right? In China, that's still building itself. It's a very new series. The tracks are new. Everything's new. They're trying things for the first time. You're going to see a separation of quality, I might say, both in the competition and the way that things are run. They'll take a few years to smooth things out, and eventually, hopefully, Chinese F4 becomes a prominent racing series in its own right.
I think another good example of that is the regional series in America, because like obviously we've yet to see Formula 1 talent out of there, but we've seen a lot of IndyCar talent. Kyle Kirkwood, Colton Herta are some great examples of guys who have like done really, really well in those Formula Regional series here stateside, but not quite to that F1 level of talent. So you're still going to see a lot of guys in Europe and maybe like New Zealand and a couple other places. You're going to get all kinds into that right now. But
yeah. And just to close off this whole geographic bit, obviously Logan Sargent. We got his hat right over there. His signature on that hat. So the thing about Logan Sargent moved to England or something. He moved to Europe anyway when he was like 12, because the tracks there, those are the tracks that he's going to be racing in F1. You're going to be racing, Spa. That's the only European track that's come to mind at the moment, but you get the point. If you spend all your life in Super Formula, for example, do you know what that is? So Super Formula is sort of its own racing series.
This is absolutely going to get its own episode at some point as well.
It has to. It's very, very cool. It's the second fastest single-seater motorsport in the world.
I would put IndyCar up there too.
Yeah, maybe
but
third. It's in terms of speed, Super Formula is between Formula 2 and Formula 1.
Okay.
Liam Lawson did a campaign.
Yep.
Super
Theo
Formula.
Porcher.
Exactly. Oh, did he?
Yeah, but before he made the jump over to Indy with McLaren, yeah.
Oh, I did. I remember him talking about it. But I didn't know he did that.
Alex Palou, a couple other international guys, yeah.
IndyCar, right?
Pierre Gasly, yes.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I did know that. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
It was very controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was my original point on this? Super Formula. my god.
You tell me, dude.
Oh yeah, so if you spend your entire life racing Super Formula in Japan, sure you'll have Suzuka, whatever. Is it Suzuki?
Yeah,
Suzuka. Sure, you have Suzuka and whatever, but you've never even touched Spa. You've never even seen these kind of tracks in person. So you're going to be at a disadvantage if you ever go to Formula 2 or Formula 3 after messing around with those kind of things. But now, wow, to actually talk about the different series, because I'm sure you've been confused by all these like Formula 4 Italian, whatever. So let me cut it out. Let me lay it out in a list. So there's Formula 4, there's Formula Regional, Formula 3, Formula 2, and then obviously Formula 1. Now, 4, 3, 2, 1, pretty easy. What the hell is Formula Regional? You want to jump in on this?
I think you probably have this down a little bit better than me, but when we talk about all of these different numbers, there's two of the big kahunas, and that's Formula 3 and Formula 2. Those are the FIA series, the ones that travel along with the actual F1 calendar. And the goal for all of these drivers is to kind of get into that international series, right? But those first kind of starting steps is driving in the Formula Regional Series, which, I mean, it's very similar machinery to the Formula 3 cars at the fastest, and then a lot of F4 cars at the slowest, but the goal is to use those series to prove yourself and get yourself promoted to that kind of international junior league.
Yeah, so do you get that? It's kind of like a stepping stone between Formula 4 Regional Series and then the Formula 3 one single championship series. So I think Formula Regional cars, Formula Regional cars are built to F3 spec. A generic Formula 4 car is going to weigh about 1,200 pounds, make about 180 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot. In fact, it's almost 10% of what F1 makes. And the jumps kind of just become exponential. Freka, you add on another 100 horsepower.
For the kids at home, can you tell us what Freka stands for?
Oh my god, I just completely missed over it, didn't I? So Freka is Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine. Obviously, no one wants to say that, so we just say Freka. There's a few other regional championships, but Freka is the main sort of like, it's the biggest one. It's the most competitive, the most prestigious Formula Regional Series, and that's where all the, if you're a two-time F4 champ and your team doesn't want to send you to F3 yet, you're going to be going to Freka.
Freka is kind of what people consider to be maybe that last step before going international. Yeah. And I think you could also consider maybe GB3 in that conversation as well, but we might get into that a little bit more in a second.
Yeah, I mean, so real quick, GB3, don't know what it stands for. Great Britain 3 or something.
Yeah,
they don't have a name for it.
Wordplay on GP3.
I looked it up. Yeah,
it's the British Formula 3 Championship, and I think they decided to name it as GB3.
Yeah, but that's its own like very prominent thing. The only difference is it's not FIA it's not an official FIA series. It's its own thing.
Okay.
So you go from Freka to F3, and then from F3 to F2.
This is a big jump.
This is the first big jump. Try to guess. So F3 makes about 260 horsepower. What do you think F2 makes? Without looking at my screen.
So
I'm not looking at the screen.
In my brain, I'm actually assuming that it's going to be a lot closer to horsepower than you might think, but I actually think these F2 cars are heavier than the F1 cars. They are.
Heavier.
Let's call it 550, 600 horsepower.
620 horsepower.
There we go.
620 horsepower. So you're adding about 200 pounds of weight, but you're also tacking on 300, 250 horsepower. That's a lot. And the problem is that a lot of drivers can't really adapt to this. So
yeah.
Moving from one level to another, it's a test of, can you adapt to this car in a year or two? If you can't, get out. That's sort of the vibe. If you get to F2 and you're a rookie, you're expected to win the championship in 2 years, or you're gone.
Yep.
Wow, that's cutthroat.
It is kind of cooked. You know Felipe Drugovich, right? Felipe Drugovich, no? He's Aston Martin's reserve driver.
Okay.
Third-year champion. Teo Porcher, we just talked about him.
Yep.
Third-year champion. Who else is the third year?
This is you, man.
This should be. I had a name here. Oh no.
How we doing, Nikki?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick recap.
Of everything?
Yeah, of everything.
Is this going
active
in?
demonstration.
Okay. Well, so there's Formula 4 in China, Italy, and
Just all over the world.
All
you
over
don't have
the
to list the
world.
whole thing, but there's a lot of regionals.
yes, and then there's Formula 3, and it's lower horsepower than Formula 2. Everything gets heavier in Formula 2. What else did we talk about?
I'll say this: there's a lot of Formula 3 championships as well around the world, but the big one that everyone wants to go to is the FIA F3 championship because again, that's going with the IMSA or not IMSA. That's going with the F1 championship,
Yeah.
and it allows you to kind of, if you're good enough, that's what you could do to get yourself in the one and only F2 championship, which is that final step to really get it going.
Yeah, so I kind of compiled a little list of things that you might need for an F1 season.
Okay.
If you are a 6-year-old in karting who's doing really well. 1, performance. You need to win a lot. And this is optional because 2, luck. You can just get really, really lucky instead. I mean, you still have to be able to drive.
Yeah.
But more important than luck, as I've already said before, money. You need a lot of it. You can win all you want. If you can't find money for a seat, you can say goodbye to F1. Go drive sports cars, kiddo.
How much money are we talking?
It depends largely on the seat and depending on...
For sure the series.
The series as well. Like, for example, not all series are equal in terms of price. I mean, obviously, certain teams might be more, lenient, I guess, if they're backing a driver. So you can get team backing. Like, Williams has their junior driver academy. They're very active about that. For example, like Bianca Bustamante, she's part of the McLaren's junior driver academy. So teams, major teams, F1 teams, even F2 teams will kind of outreach to drivers and look for that. But as for an answer on how much it might cost to do an F3, F4 season, probably in the several hundred thousands, I would say.
Wow.
I'll say this. I know as a fact you're looking into maybe 6-figure digits when it comes to running a Formula 2 season.
Yeah.
Just for, and it makes sense because it's a chassis and an engine that's being used nowhere else. You're traveling more than any of the other junior series. It's that last major step. And I think another really important point you got to mention here, Joey, is guys at this point are probably becoming a big enough name where you don't necessarily need funding straight from your own pockets. You probably do have some kind of sponsorship in some means. This is where Red Bull has been such a huge help for a lot of these kids to be in these kind of Red Bull Junior programs where you wear our helmet, you have our branding, we'll fund you, we'll give you the resources you need to kind of develop. And there's been a lot of guys who even haven't ended up in Formula One that have been benefited big time by that.
Exactly.
Pato Award is a really good example. Alex Palou, a lot of guys have gotten help from them.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think Logan Sargent got a seat in F1?
Was he a Red Bull driver?
A
No,
brand?
he was a Williams.
He was, yes.
Yeah.
Well, was he in Williams Junior Academy though?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
the reason that Williams chose to get Sargent in and not someone else, and the same reason they would eventually do this to Colapinto, was because, probably because it's Williams, they don't have any money, and they've spent millions investing into these people's careers. So it's a bit of we have to kind of put these guys in and see what they can do because we've spent so much money on them.
Right.
And if you're watching at home and you've heard of all these crazy championship series, what the hell is Intercontinental A or Formula K, you don't need to worry about that.
No.
Honestly, it's if you go into Lewis Hamilton's junior category, you see series that don't even exist anymore.
It's really hard to do that. Again, we talk about Lewis Hamilton and his journey up, but it just feels so against the grain, his journey. And I think you have the play-by-play here for how this came to be. But he started out with racing RC cars, and I don't think got into an actual car until he was maybe 13, 14, if I remember, was taking a really long journey. And we talk about the luck factor into that, and for him it was running into Ron Dennis and saying he wants to drive for him and getting his contact info. Little stuff like that is also what goes such a long way when it comes to these guys, making it to the bigs.
Are you talking about when he was 8 years old?
Yeah.
Because I don't think Ron did that lead to to them meeting each other?
I think it absolutely had some kind of
Maybe a little
play in
bit.
that.
We're going to start off with someone that you're going to recognize, Kimi Antonelli.
Yes.
He started racing cars in 2021. In 2022, he won Italian F4, ADAC F4. In 2023, he won Formula Regional Middle East Championship. Then he won FRECA, the European Championship.
Should mention ADAC is German, by the way, but keep going.
That's German F4. And then he skipped Formula 3, won 2 races in F2, and then Toto Wolff decided, okay, I want my Max Verstappen quickly. So that's a very straightforward, junior driver career. Win everything, go to F1.
Yeah.
Except he didn't really win everything because he skipped Formula 3.
Can I mention something else really cool that he did? By the way, he represented Italy in the FIA Motorsports Games, which is the Olympics, if you will, of motorsports. They have a gajillion things, but they have F4 as one of their competitions, and it was 2022. I want to say it was Jerez or Barcelona. I'm like 90% sure, but one for them, and I think. I don't think that was necessarily a big one, but not a lot of people can say they represented their country in the racing Olympics.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, it was
that's pretty cool.
I think I remember that, and it was really interesting. But they were trying to make the motorsport games a whole thing, but that's all right. We can talk about that later.
Yep.
Now we're going to go to Lewis Hamilton again. 2001, he started driving Formula Renault UK. Don't even know what that is.
Formula Renault does not exist anymore. It kind of, what is left of it, sort of became FRECA.
Yeah. And then there's Formula Renault Euro Cup. Then the Formula 3 Euro Series. These all sound like the same thing to me. They kind of are. And what's interesting about Lewis Hamilton's junior career is he doesn't really win anything. He kind of goes from series to series, does really well for a few races,
Runner-up?
and then drops off. Well, I can't name out any numbers off the top of my head. But what I do remember off my very basic research was that he would enter seasons partially. And this is something that drivers still do, is that they'll enter a couple rounds of a particular series and then drop out, either for experience or tracks, or maybe they just need points. Whatever the reason, they do this. And in a nutshell, Hamilton's junior career, if you were to look at it, it in no way, shape, or form suggests that he would one day become a 7-time Formula 1 world champion. It just doesn't. It just doesn't really it doesn't seem like he's all that special. And we kind of saw this with Franco Colapinto as well. Colapinto had a decent junior driving career, and then he went to F1 and kind of blew everyone's expectations. He blew my expectations, at least. After seeing Logan Sargent not doing so well, I was like, this kid's career is very much the same. And then a foil to that, Ollie Behrman, who has not been doing very well in Formula 2 in his latest series. He's not even a championship. He's like a third-year non-championship. He gets 4th, 5th, 6th place in the standings, and he has a seat now with Haas. So once again, this whole luck thing is a huge part of it. But yeah, I mean, just
because wasn't he the reserve driver for some Formula 1 team?
Behrman, yeah,
Ferrari.
Yeah,
and
then
for Ferrari.
he scored points in the race,
first
right?
race he ever
yeah,
did.
yeah,
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I feel like it's things like that, like he right place, right time, and then he gets a seat in F1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue the same thing with Liam Lawson with being in the right place, right time.
Yes.
Because we go back to, it was Dutch Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo fractures his finger, wrist, hand, and has the most chaotic debut to Formula 1 ever. I don't know if you remember how insane that race was.
Yeah.
But it's a lot like minor league baseball, right? If you're AAA, you've got to be ready to get that call up at a moment's notice. And if you pop off on debut, if you get points on debut, that goes a really, really long way. Look at what Nick DeVries did a couple of years ago with Williams. I know that wasn't the result that they were looking for, but long term, you can see what that does for a driver with a solid debut. So it means a lot to execute well on that debut, and the luck doesn't hurt.
Yeah. And then there's someone who's very exceptional, even today. But his junior career is very exceptional because Max Verstappen, he was pretty much unbeatable in karts, as you might expect. He won 2 races in something called the Florida Winter Series, which I also believe...
The Florida Winter Series?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where he beat Latifi to the championship by 0.004 seconds.
Okay.
And I actually want to talk about Latifi in a second here, too. And then Max Verstappen, drove in F3, won 10 races, almost all in a row, and then he drove for Formula One the next year. Guy basically skipped everything. He was so dominant. Of course, it's Max Verstappen. What else do you expect? Nicholas Latifi, I just mentioned him very briefly as the guy that Max Verstappen beat in the Florida Winter Series. He actually has a pretty solid junior career. And like I said, in the same way that Lewis Hamilton's junior career doesn't really show the makings of an all-time great, you would expect Latifi to have been pretty good at F1. You know, he was a Formula 2 race winner. He was competing against Max Verstappen in the earlier categories, but sometimes you just can't make that cut. And there's a few reasons why. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Not quite. Help me out here.
Well, there's a few things. One is the aero package. Actually, let me just jump into a new thing here. So this is a good segue because Formula 1 and Formula 2, they both have DRS. None of the junior categories, Formula 2 included, have the energy recovery system. Formula 1 has power steering. None of the other series have power steering. And you kind of might get where I'm going with this. They're completely different cars at every single stage of the... It's all about adaptability. Sargent was saying earlier this past season that Formula 2 cars don't prepare drivers for Formula 1 at all because it's an entirely different set of skills you're training for. Do you want to jump in on this? If you have any questions.
I mean, I want to say really quickly, I don't think anything can prepare anyone for the complexities of an F1 energy management system unless you're maybe a fighter pilot and you're used to that. But Formula 2, I mean, at the end of the day, trying to make it as close to Formula 1, even while it still has that simplicity and that, you know, level of entry, having the the actuators, the servos to pull a DRS flap, to have all of those electronics integrated, to have a hybrid system, that's going to double the prices for some of these lower rung series. And again, ultimately, you want these to be as entry level friendly as possible. You cannot sacrifice that at all. And for a lot of these, it doesn't necessarily have the same level of effect at different levels. The Formula 1600s and the Formula Vs at the very bottom, they're rarely going fast enough to where the wings, any wings that would be on there, are actually producing enough downforce to help the car. You need to be going fast enough for those wings to generate lift and actually push the car down. Same thing with if F4 or F3 cars had DRS, you're not really going fast enough down the straight where a hole punch in your wing is going to make a big difference to top speed. It's going to make so much more of a difference if you're going, 210, 220 and that wing slots open. But down low, it's going to be pennies on the dollar when it comes to top speed.
This is really true because obviously optimizing a car is going to cost a lot of money. But my sort of biggest issue with the Formula feeder series is that the cars are it goes up and down in terms of how easy it is to drive. Someone who goes driving in Formula 4, wins races, etc., they might suddenly struggle in FRECA because the cars require a lot more strength to actually move around the corners. What are you looking at me like that for?
Because Formula 1 is the only one that has power steering.
Exactly.
So you're getting yoked in... Nikki, do you know what power steering is and what that kind of entails?
I've heard it before,
You
but I don't
have
know what
all
it
of your
entails.
road cars have it. It's a hydraulic pump that basically helps you muscle your car around a turn because for massive cars, it really, really helps.
Yeah.
But for lighter weight cars, you get a lot more feedback. It's a lot easier to kind of feel the car and massage it through. Also, weight reduction. But yeah, Formula 1, it does have it. But you should have guys that are absolutely yoked going into F2 and F1, so that's not even a problem in the first place.
I mean, you saw Ollie Behrman's neck before his Ferrari stint. You know what I'm talking about?
A picture of his neck? No.
So you know how F1 drivers are big.
Yeah.
There's a picture of Ollie Behrman. There's a little video of him bobbing his head around because he can't handle the pressure of the Formula 1 car. Yeah. And after that race,
the lateral G's, yeah.
Bro's been building his neck. It's kind of funny. But you have to prepare yourself for that kind of physical fitness.
Right.
So, going up from F3 to F2, it's not just about driving, it's about knowing how to take care of yourself too. I feel like a fucking fitness, health coach saying that. But
It's true.
It's true. It's true.
So wait, I have a question. If the feeder series don't necessarily set you up to move like from F4 to F3 to F2 to F1, why has it just been structured that way? Did that just kind of happen?
Well, I think there's two pathways we're talking here. One is like the technical development of these cars, and the other is sort of the traditional, like the way we've done things. Because I mean, Formula 2, Formula 3, those classes have existed pretty much as long as Formula 1 has existed. They just haven't been. I mean, it was very recent that Formula 2 and Formula 3 were like grabbed by the FIA and said, "This is a thing, by the way."
Yeah.
Before it was kind of just like it was.
When it was GP2 and GP3,
yeah, they were unaffiliated, and sometimes even before GP2, GP3, it was Formula 2, and then it was something else, and then you'll go to like a wiki page for like
the concept of that last category before F1 has always existed. It's just taken a lot of monikers, a lot of different ownerships, a lot of different structures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and to be honest, generally the people who win right off the bat in Formula 2, you kind of know that they're going to be a big talent. I mean, you look at Oscar Piastri, you look at Kimi Antonelli, maybe, probably, Max Verstappen. There are going to be outliers, people who dominate every single kind of car they drive, and that's really what stands out to teams, is that guy is for sure a talent.
Can I throw something in here? Because you're making some great points. First of all, yeah, your top flight guys, your Max Verstappens of the world, your Oscar Piastris, they're not going to be complaining about how a certain car fails to set them up for the next series, because they've got that plasticity to approaching a car where it's instant for them. We saw that with Theo Pourchaire, who's driven so many different cars under the sun. He did F2, went to Super Formula, went to IndyCar, was fast in all of them. And I mean, Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli, these are guys that are able to be competitive right out of the box no matter what kind of car they're driving. If you're not able to handle that kind of minute differences in jumping up from a certain car, you're going to struggle when your designer in Formula One maybe approaches a new set of regs with a different philosophy. Or you could just suck in any kind of reg change. And I think that's the really big issue with Formula One and racing as a whole. I don't want to make another stickball comparison here, Nikki, but like, we're the only sport in the world where the fields change, the balls change, the rules change. It is a constantly changing kind of battlefield. Nothing is ever the same one way or another. So you need that adaptability in all kinds of different ways. And that's a major part of what is leading to what guys are looking for in a good driver. By the way, if we were adapting a junior car every single set of regs or every single year to match what that F1 car might look like, we're right back at ground zero with those cost issues.
Yeah.
Tons of money.
Tons of money. Formula 2 actually went through a major change. I don't know if you saw this, maybe like some breaking news. They have a new F2 car. It's faster, it's got more aero on it and everything. And 2024 was the first year of its, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so 2024 was its first year. And generally, when this happens in Formula 2, all the drivers kind of get a reset on their championship clock, so to say.
Yeah, because it's a whole new thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No one knows where anyone's going to be. There's a team called Prema, and I'm going to try to avoid team names and drivers a lot, but there's a team called Prema. They're very active in motorsport. They've got their hands everywhere. They're doing IndyCar now. They're very good. Historically, they're just always good because they have great facilities, they have the best staff, they have the best engineers, but they kind of botched the new F2 car, the new regulations. They couldn't get the setup right, and Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman, who were their drivers last year, they were scoring like 17th, 18th place. And this entire time, everyone's been saying, oh, Oliver Behrman's going to be the next F2 champion. Kimi Antonelli's going to be the hot new thing. And then for the first few weekends, they were hot nothing. And that really took away from Kimi Antonelli, not so much because he has Toto Wolff's backing, but that really took away from Ollie Behrman's credibility as a driver until, again, of course, he was pulled in for Ferrari.
Yeah.
And so was the crazy sequence of events that led to this. And I don't even remember what my original point was.
I think we're missing a major aspect of this, which is the fact that almost all of these series, bar a couple of exceptions, are what we call spec series. And
Yes.
that is basically everyone's getting the exact same car with a couple of tweaks. Maybe you have one or two different chassis or engines, but you're almost always getting the same tires, same aerodynamic elements, very, very similar cars. So that adds a lot of weight on driver talent. But so too, you could say, engineering, driver coaching, how you approach, a weekend from a behind the scenes standpoint goes such a long way for these drivers. So who you sign for is absolutely important.
Yeah. You want the best preparation you can get.
Yeah.
You want the most experienced people, obviously. And there's something interesting about that I was just really going to tag on quick at the end. Repeat what you just said.
Just everything's a spec series, right? So
Yeah.
so who you have when the one factor that everybody has that's the same is the car, you want as much of a elbow up on every other aspect, whether it's obviously driver talent, but driver coaching, engineering, strategy, setups. You need as much of an advantage everywhere else you can get it.
Exactly. I mean, how many times has a Formula One race been decided by a pit stop?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, McLaren wouldn't have won that championship if not for their, what was it, like 1.6 second pit stop on the last race in 2024. Yeah. And then, of course, there's also, this is kind of specific to Formula 2. And I feel like you know what I'm going to talk about. But there is this thing called the engine lottery in Formula 2.
Yes.
Because the way it's done, first I want to hear what you think engine lottery means.
Well, I'm just imagining like okay, let's say like this is the best engine, right?
NBA draft.
The best engine you could get.
Okay.
And I don't know, like there's I imagine a bowl and there's a bunch of names of teams in a bowl and you pick out a
This
name
would be
from a
so
bowl.
sick if this was the way they actually did it.
Pick out a name from a bowl and like you lottery, you get the best engine. Here you go.
Yeah, pretty. I mean, aside from the fact that they don't know what the engines are going to be like, pretty much. I mean, unless you want to add something onto that.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, let's start with this. If you haven't watched a Formula 2 race, you need to because the Mechachrome engines are some of my favorite sounding engines in the world.
Can you give us
sounds better.
Can you give us a little?
And it spits out flame. That's going nowhere. That better not be going anywhere. But no.
Yes.
It sounds like a cross between an IndyCar engine and like an old school V8 F1 engine. Mm-hmm. It's got this big old twin turbo on it, or is it single turbo, Matt? Single turbo, and you hear that when it off the gas, you hear the and it spits out flames. It sounds so good. That being said, they are incredibly unreliable. So we talk about the joke of the lottery is this driver has a lot of talent, but he's not able to prove it because he lost the lottery and his engine went on him. Moto Miata was a really good example of that. Had a lot of retirements. Came from Super Formula and Super GT. Wanted to prove himself. Had Toyota Gazoo Racing backing, which we've never seen in Formula 2. But yeah, had the bad luck bug a lot there. So we talk about luck being a factor, not just in getting the call up, but I guess in staying alive in Formula 2. That's a really big factor.
There was a comment, I believe, made by our favorite chitster, Helmut Marko.
Yeah.
Who was comparing lap time speeds on straights between Sargent and I believe he was referring to Colapinto. And he was basically saying the only reason that Sargent ever looked fast in Formula 2 was because he had a good engine. And after he switched an engine mid-season, he was like, you can clearly see that Sargent is going slower here. So it's a little interesting. A lot of people don't, they hate on it. They're like, why are we still using Mechachrome? But, it's kind of a weird situation.
It's an exclusivity deal for manufacturers. You usually sign it to say we're going to be supplying your engines for X years. It's the exact same deal with when it comes to Dallara as their chassis supplier, Pirelli as their tire supplier, et cetera, et cetera. I do want to mention something really big here, though, and that is pit stops when it comes to all of these regional series, because there really isn't a lot of series that have pit stops or strategy in them. The big exception, I believe, is Formula 2, which you're going to see two. You have your sprint race and your feature race. That feature race is usually the only time you will see guys before Formula 1 making pit stops.
I can't believe we didn't go at all into what a formula. I guess it kind of differs between every category.
Right.
But a junior category weekend looks.
It's almost never going to be just one race.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Yeah.
So what does it look like?
There's usually a race 1, and then Formula 2 has a system where the top 10 of race 1 becomes flipped, and that is your starting order for race 2.
Why?
So Kate,
Why?
here's what we're going to say. Because the logistics, again, these teams don't have the money to go to every single track that Formula 1 does. If you're in America, you don't have the money to logistically put your team, in 15, 20 locations a year. So it's like, we're going to go to these 7 tracks, but when we're there, we're going to run 2, maybe even 3 races.
Oh, okay.
And those can differ in length. Some of them have those kinds of rules where, maybe it's reverse order, maybe it's reverse order based on the top 10. Maybe your starting order is based on the finishing order of the last race. It's a bunch of different stuff like that. But when you're not able to get on track that much, you make that up in, maximizing your track time for that weekend.
And basically the reason that they do like reverse grid order is because you want to give it is a developmental series.
Right.
You want to give the people who are not doing so great to be able to, if driver A, finishes 10th, can he defend as well as he attacked?
Right. Because your starting place on the grid is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so important. So that makes sense.
Formula Feeder Series, do you understand that there's like several big series? There's like Formula 4, Formula 3, etc. We're going to talk a little briefly about something called the Macau Grand Prix.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the Macau Grand Prix is a bit unique in junior series because it's not, as the name would imply, it's not like a series. It's one race that happens once every year. And it's kind of like the Monaco Grand Prix of lower junior.
It's the crown jewel of the junior Formula
and
races.
also
Really?
it's a very tight, very fast city circuit.
Yep.
And the racing is incredible.
It's awesome.
It's amazing. Imagine Monaco, but it's cars are a bit slower, yes. But there's like 50 cars.
Yeah.
And B,
it's good that the cars are slower because the track is so narrow in some parts.
and the cars are much smaller.
So you can actually overtake.
You can overtake.
Yeah.
There's always overtaking. Now the weird thing about Macau is I'm mentioning it because it's a very cool race. It's a very cool.
I'm gonna see if I can get this for you, Nikki. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not actually that prestigious though in terms of where its winners end up. I believe the last winner of the Macau Grand Prix to make it to Formula 1 and do anything significant was Hulkenberg.
Oh, okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Just to show you how narrow this can be. This is going off. So you've got this kind of main straightaway and a little bit of a kink to the right, and then it gets into this super tight.
Yeah.
This is Monaco's hairpin on crack.
Yeah, it looks like that.
The tightest turn in motorsports.
Interesting.
I think Max Verstappen got 5th place in Macau.
Max Verstappen has driven there. Lando Norris. You
Charles,
can go.
I think Leclerc did as well.
You can turn the dial all the way back to Senna.
Yeah.
Running laps there.
Yeah.
So, should also mention that there is also the GT Invitational there. So they have GT3 cars going as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. What? Oh, I did know that.
You do know this because you've seen the clip
I
of,
have seen
I think
that.
it was 2017, where it was literally one car piled it into the wall and everybody else had nowhere to go. So they just stack up millions of dollars of damage. It's insane.
Was Sophia Florsch's crash in Macau?
Yeah, that was her big one. That was her big
one. Do you know
one.
who Sophia Florsch is? She's a woman driver. Well, obviously. She was racing in Formula 3 and did okay. She got a couple points here and there. She had a brake failure in Macau. She was going maybe 120 miles an hour. Car flies through a wall, and if you watch it, you'll be like, oh my god, did I just watch someone die?
Yeah.
It was crazy. She broke her neck.
Oh my god.
and then went back to racing next year.
She's doing Indy next this year.
Yeah, she's
Wow.
not doing badly, to be honest.
No.
Go
not at all.
her.
Yeah,
No,
That's
she's
awesome.
kicking ass. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's
Very
awesome.
Yes, sir. I could talk about Formula One Academy.
I almost feel like that deserves its own episode.
It's too young to have its own episode.
Yeah, I feel like it's so recent, and I didn't realize they're making a doc about that.
Oh, really?
I did see
Yeah.
that. They're making a Netflix documentary about Formula. Wow.
What kind of engine was that? I feel like, okay, I know that a lot of people don't like Drive to Survive because of the way that it dramatizes everything, but I do think it's a great way for people to know about what this sport is. That's
Absolutely.
how I found out about the sport, and through F1 did I find out about F1 Academy. So I feel like it deserves its own show.
It does. And I will say, women in motorsport, that's like a whole conversation we gotta have at some point.
Exactly.
But like, it is by far the most marketed like junior category, except for maybe Formula 2. And I would wager I would argue it's more heavily marketed than Formula 2.
I would absolutely agree. I mean,
God damn. We do a lap or something? An outlap? Bro's about to do a cannonball run.
we're gonna wait.
Reverse.
Can we do a cannonball
Dude,
episode? That would be
I would
sick.
love to do a. Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
We'll get back. Oh, no.
Just real quick. We're gonna cut
Okay. Yeah.
We're gonna cut this out, but they back in like the 60s and 50s or whatever, they would race like these high class sports cars from like Manhattan and then race them all across the country.
Red Ball Garage in New York
Super-
City to the
Oh.
Portofino Cafe
Yeah.
in Los Angeles. Yep.
Super legal.
That's pretty sick.
They had like spotters watching for like cop cars. Anyway,
Yeah.
there's a FIA. It's definitely heavily marketed. I think they're trying a little too hard to push it, especially with the machinery they're giving those girls.
Yeah, I'm looking at these cars and I'm like,
They
this
are.
shit
These are F.
sucks.
Those are F4 cars.
Those are
Those are
F4
F4
This
cars.
shit's terrible.
They're not only F4 cars, they're old F4 cars.
Oh my god, I need to tell you about this. I forget the specifics, but there was this French streamer who did an all-star. This should tell you about how like arrive and drive Formula 4 cars can be. But this French streamer did like an all-star race at Paul Ricard with like a ton of other internet celebrities from Europe, and did like a whole regional like Grand Prix, like an all-celebrity Grand Prix with everybody in F4 cars.
That's really
Wow.
I think some of the sidemen ran it.
Wait, what?
I need to double
That's
check on
crazy.
that, but like a lot of FIFA streamers, like a lot of really big names went and ran it, and there was like 5,000 people there to watch it. It was so sick.
Wow.
That's very cool, and I'm actually surprised that all those people were able to drive Formula 4 cars, because they're still pretty quick. I mean, it's like it's basically you're basically driving a supercar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were supposed to, I'm gonna make this a bird walk now. If we were to do a sort of content clash but racing here in America, who would you guys want in a? Let's assume it's all F4 cars. Who would you guys want to see in a content clash race?
James May.
Oh, I kind of want to keep it to
Non-car
car guys.
people?
Yeah,
Non-car people?
like I want to see Markiplier.
Oh my god, that'd be cool.
Would that not be sick?
That'd be
I
cool.
don't want my race to be just filled with screaming the entire time. I'm sorry.
Okay, are you telling
He
me you
wouldn't
wouldn't want
scream.
Michael from Vsauce, like
No,
throwing it up
no,
the
I
inside
don't.
of
I really,
Dan and
I
Phil?
really don't.
Come
I don't,
on!
That's even worse. Every name you added to that list made it even worse. Sorry.
Jake Paul?
I was gonna.
I
s-
would-
I
Prime
was.
car?
I was
I
gonna
would
say the
watch-
Paul
He
brothers.
would absolutely do it.
I would pay good money for someone to ram into Jake
Yeah.
Paul in turn one.
I'm not gonna comment on that, but yeah, who would you want, Nikki?
Well, the first person that came to mind is Kai Cenat, because I feel
Oh
like
my
he would
God,
make it
yes.
so interesting.
We can throw our show speed in there as well.
Yeah. Who else? What?
Costco Kid.
He's like, we can put. Okay, wait, is AJ or Big Justice the dad?
I don't even. I'm not. I don't know.
AJ's the dad. I think AJ should do it.
Costco Kid
Absolutely.
is. I don't know who Costco Kid is.
You don't know who?
No idea.
Have you seen We Bring the Boom?
Boom.
That's what we do.
Guys, I am
Dude, okay,
so off
You've
the internet.
also not been in America for like 2 months, so I will give you benefit of the
I
doubt
haven't
there.
either. I've been in Korea.
Only
I've been in
10 days.
Japan.
I've just been off the internet for like 2 months.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole tangent, though. I would.
Yeah.
God, that would be so sick. Long Beach used to do like an all-star celebrity race, like a pro-am race, and there was like, oh God, Alfonso Ribeira from Fresh Prince, and like a ton of other people.
You know, you can buy like an old Formula Mazda car for like 10 grand.
Yeah.
I'd so do that.
Right? Well, I mean, you would need more money and experience to actually run it and get it up. But you know, you find one of those chassis, you pop a go-kart engine in it, and go ham, I say.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like, you know, maintenance, tires, you have to pay fees to actually get to the track.
Yeah.
Gas, you need a hauler, fire suit and helmet, safety stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than just the price tag.
Yeah, but it is relatively inexpensive to go out and maybe, you know, buy a Formula Mazda, you know, find a team that can, you know, track team, private club maybe. Those are all over America, and I'm sure even more all over Europe is you'll have small tracks running club series. You're not going to be making any money here. You're not going to be on TV. You might be on some local.
There's a club series that makes you a lot of money if you win.
Which one?
Grid Life?
MX5 Cup.
MX5 Cup is true.
MX5 Cup
That's
is like barely.
that's
like,
that's getting close. I mean, that's probably the biggest like
That's the feeder
club
for-
racing
MX5
out
Cup
there.
is as close as you can get to pro, while not being pro. I think.
Yes.
It's so widely recognized that like, I feel like the caliber of talent there is just
Insane.
yeah.
Well, it's to the point where they're just like people are just throwing young drivers into their teams.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
also,
because it's a
kind of-
real series now.
Yeah.
It's also the proving ground kind of for moving into TCR and then to
Yeah, moving into Pilot Challenge. We'll save that. We need a all the other sports car series episode at some point.
Yeah.
But going back to that, I think we do need to have. You can tell we're young because we're talking about all the different. We're young as a podcast because we're talking about all the different episodes I want us to do at some point. Silas Montgomery, who runs in Spec E30 a lot with NASA, which is one of the kind of grassroots racing series. I think we absolutely should have one of those episodes at some point and tell you guys you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to be racing go-karts since like age of 6 to go do this, because if you've got enough money and a lot less than you maybe thought, you can still go play race car driver on the weekend.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of people who are entering Formula 4 from karting, they will usually like rent out an older Formula 4 car or a Formula Mazda car because you know they got to get used to driving in a car versus a cart, for example. So yeah, I mean they're used all over the place. You can get a Formula W. You can get a Formula W car. They were auctioning those, and that's Formula. It was Formula W. It was a women's racing series.
Yeah.
It went absolutely nowhere. And kind of that shell of a ghost eventually kind of not became, but it was where they dropped off.
That's
F1
where
Academy
Academy came back in. Yeah.
picked up on. Literally, like I think Formula W ended in like 2022, and then
Really?
yeah,
Oh.
and then F1 Academy was 2023.
23. Yeah.
Right. Because I was like, I feel like it's a recent thing.
It was
F1
pretty
Academy.
recent. I mean, its only champion was Jamie Chadwick,
Yeah.
who is now an Indy.
Indy Next, now looking for an IndyCar ride, might be part-time this year with Delcoin. We'll see.
She won a race in Indy NXT.
She did.
Which is pretty cool. Actually, really cool considering like her age and like her previous like record. Not super spectacular. Indy NXT win kind of hit me out of nowhere. Not gonna lie. Yeah.
I think we're getting to that hour point here,
that checkered flag moment.
Yeah. Well, I think let's start with Nikki. With everything we've kind of thrown at you, what is like the main takeaways for you? I'm putting you on the spot here.
The main takeaways. I think be kind to all of the drivers in the lower series and also the ones who just moved up from F2 to F1 because I didn't realize how many differences there were between them and the different kind of training that you have to do to adapt to these cars.
Yeah.
So, my main takeaway is just to be a little bit kinder to the people in the driver's seat.
And I think the big one is if you see a guy not fail to make it to Formula One, it's not always just off of talent on its own, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you fail on the business side, maybe funding doesn't work out. So when you see, guys like Jack Aitken, Frederick Vesti, a lot of these guys, have sports car careers after, there's a very alternate universe out there where maybe if there was a couple thousand more in their bank account, things could have been different. And those are still careers that absolutely should still be celebrated, both in the past and as F2 drivers and presently as, sports car drivers, because they're still doing a really, really good job. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do the take at the checkered here, and I think it's going to be in retaliation to exactly what I just said.
Not a retaliation entirely. I was going to say, just to add on a little bit, Frederick Vesti was like right before he didn't win the championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't win the championship, but until the moment that he didn't win the championship, everyone was saying this kid deserves to be an F1. After he didn't win, like a name of the wind. I had forgotten about him because people had moved on from him so quickly, and it's incredibly unfair sometimes. But honestly, in a sport where you only have 20, soon to be 22 drivers, it's just going to be the way it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. My take at the checkered flag. I don't know. Anyone got anything spicy? Oh, you know what? This is not a take at all, but this is an interesting, something we should have mentioned last episode, was Ford coming back into the WEC to reignite their rivalry with Ferrari.
I mentioned that briefly at the start of that episode,
Yeah.
I think. But
Obviously you've seen Ford v Ferrari.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
Now, Ferrari came back, and on their Le Mans re-entry, they won the 100th anniversary race in style with Italian Jesus.
yes.
How do you think Ford will do? Do you think, because I think it'd be really funny if everyone hyped up, this super grand comeback entrance, and then they just, end up 20th.
I'm going to remind you right now that Ford initially attempted to do Le Mans with the Mustang 10 years ago for the anniversary of the 66 Le Mans. And Multimatic, who was working with them, were so dog slow in testing with that car before they even built it. They were like, we can't do it. And Ford was like, can we just make a car to a bona fide Le Mans car? And Multimatic's like, do you mean basically making another GT? And Ford was like, I mean, yeah, sure. That's the level of commitment I think Ford has when it comes to programs like this. And you've got an all-star cast of engine makers that are, already making Formula One caliber work right now with Red Bull powertrains.
I mean, Ford has a huge history of making engines for Formula One for different motorsports.
I'm not sure if the Multimatic partnership is going to continue because they're with Porsche and a couple other guys right now. But you'd have to imagine that the investment there absolutely is going to be to bring the fight to Ferrari, just like it was 50-something years ago. I would argue.
I was trying to think of an example when I was going to say, just like when XYZ put all their money into F1 and failed miserably, and I'm struggling to actually think of an
Richard
answer.
Branson and Virgin, HRT.
Virgin doesn't count.
Toyota.
Virgin's car was
Spiker.
a Formula 3 car disguised as an F1 car.
I'm Jackson Lambros.
I'm Joey Chaw.
I'm Nikki Wong.
This has been the Outlap Podcast. Let your passion fuel you. We'll see you next time.